Welcome to Donu's World. Hello everyone, thank God it's Friday. Welcome to Donu's World. Today I'm going to try and talk about something a bit more cheerful than some of the topics that I've been dwelling on recently. And what I'm going to talk about is late love. Now, what I mean by that is men and women who are past their prime, maybe in their late 50s or mid 50s or 60s or even 70s, who are still seeking love, or who weren't looking for love anymore, but accidentally came upon it. Now, I have a confession to make. I personally have not had a relationship for 20 years. My marriage broke down. I had one relationship with a guy I'd known at school, who said he was separated from his wife and planning to get divorced, and they didn't even live in the same city at that time. But it turned out that he had, I don't think he really set out to deceive me, but he actually, he wound up trying to make his marriage work for the sake of his child. And of course, maybe he still had some feelings for his wife. In the end, it didn't work out for them, but by then, the situation between me and him was long over. And what I would advise any woman who finds herself in a similar situation to do is this. If a guy tells you that he doesn't get on well with his wife, he wants to divorce her or she wants to divorce him, it may be true. I mean, half the time it's probably a lie. But even if it's true, you mustn't insert yourself into that situation until they have resolved their issues. By which I mean that, it may be that if you stay away, they stand a chance of patching up their marriage. Or maybe their marriage is doomed, but you mustn't be the catalyst. This is my theory anyway. You mustn't accidentally or intentionally be the person who makes it harder for them to get back together if getting back together is possible. I learned this bitter lesson early, and because, I'm really not that person. I wouldn't want a marriage that could have succeeded to fail because I clung on to the guy like some kind of limpet and wouldn't let him try again with his wife. So, just stay out of it. That's my advice to everybody. Don't get involved. Let them sort it out. And only deal with men who are divorced and didn't get divorced because of you. That's just, I guess it's the way I was brought up. Yeah? Now, so that was the last relationship I had. And you could say that the combination of my marriage failing and this relationship turning into a bit of a traumatic embarrassment, with the wife accusing me of trying to steal her husband when I had no such plans. He had told me that he was long gone from the marriage, but let's not go there anymore. I've been on my own ever since, for two reasons. One, tired of the trauma and the hassle of emotional entanglements. Two, I was bringing up a young boy by myself, and I didn't want him to see me going through one man after the other. Didn't want, the impulse to stay on my own was very strong. Again, largely because of my upbringing. Because I come from the kind of family where if your husband dies, even if you're like 25 or 30 years old, never mind 40 or 45, you don't look for anybody else. You just throw your hands up and you go, well, it didn't, it's not my portion to be happily married or to be involved with anyone. Because I remember when my father died, my son, who has a much more modern mindset, said to my mother, Grandma, are you going to marry again? And she was so appalled that he could ask her such a question, because the idea of remarrying after her husband died is just completely out of the question. You know, as far as she's concerned, you're practically a whore of Babylon if you would even consider it. So, you know, while I'm not as extreme as my mother, you know, there was a little bit of that, well, it hasn't worked, you know, it's not very appropriate to go hunting for somebody else at this stage. So I've been on my own for 20 years, really, honestly. Now, some people make fun of me because of it. And some people understand, because of course I'm by no means the only woman in this situation. I think what's unusual about me is that I haven't gone looking. And some men have approached me for romance or even marriage. And I have put them at arm's length as kindly as I can, unless they're complete jerks, in which case I'll kick them into touch, you know, in a very sort of like unpleasant way. But generally, I just gently field, you know, inquiries, expressions of interest, and, you know, resigned to living alone for the rest of my life. I'm 64 years old, and, you know, I'm beginning to wonder, you know, about my policy, because I've talked about loneliness on this channel, right here on YouTube. I've also, of course, discussed it with friends outside in my social life. And I think, well, you go on about being lonely, yet you have made no attempts to find a new partner since your last 2 relationships broke down when you were in your early 40s. So, of course you're lonely. Why don't you consider the possibility of finding a new partner that will, you know, a companion to see you through for the rest of your life? And there are men of my age and older, and also some a bit younger, who would like to have relationships with women of my age, and more specifically with me. And, you know, I have this mental block, and I need to get over it. But, well, I don't know if I need to get over it, but I'm thinking of getting over it, okay? Because another thing that happens to you when you've lived on your own for a long time is you get so independent. You might complain about feeling isolated at times, but, you know, you also like the fact that you don't have to answer to anyone. You know, you have lunch when you want to have lunch. You don't have to worry about whether he has had lunch. You put up with your own relatives, and some of them are complete nightmares. You don't have to put up with any man's relatives who are also nightmares. And, you know, of course, there's an advantage, bluntly put, in marrying a man who's very financially secure or even stinking rich. But, you know, for me, I don't know if it's a price worth paying to have that comfort. And of course, the most important thing is the emotional connection anymore, the intellectual connection. So while I'm toying with the idea of getting into the late dating and marriage scene, again, you know, kind of, I'm very interested in what my viewers are going through. You know, if you're a woman, a middle-aged or older woman who is on her own, do you date? Do you even bother to try? I mean, I've got friends who wake up in the morning and they can't be bothered to put lipstick on. Not even some because they are depressed, but some because they just don't care. They're happy on their own, or they're sometimes unhappy on their own, but they think that the you know, relationships bring too much hassle. So, you know, they sort of balance the pros and cons and decide that occasional loneliness is better than having to put up with some man and his relatives and his issues. Then, as one friend said to me, a girlfriend said to me the other day, which is a rather selfish thing to say, but it's very true. When you get to this age, you know, you're dealing with men who are about to start having health problems, if they haven't already started, whether it's prostate cancer or arthritis or some issue or the other. You know, you might think, oh, I'm going to try and get companionship in old age, but you might wind up getting a situation where you basically wind up being a nurse. So I said to this girlfriend who said this to me, but, you know, we are also about to enter a period when we are more likely than not to have health challenges. So, you know, the guy is also going to have to take care of us if anything goes wrong. And she said, well, you know, she'd rather deal. I said, isn't it nicer to have someone who cares, so that, you know, he may have problems and you care for him, and you may have problems and he cares for you? And she said, I only want to care about my own problems. So there's that whole thing. But, you know, I think that some of us who become set in our ways should seriously consider what I call a romantic renaissance. If you haven't dated for years, maybe you should think about it and, try to rise like the phoenix from the ashes or like a butterfly. What do they call the chrysalis? And, you become a butterfly from those, you just start to glow and flow and you become more vibrant. And you don't just go out with your girlfriends or your children and your mother, you know? So it's about reinventing yourself in old age or middle age. It's about opening your heart to love, which you may have not experienced for a decade or two or three. Some people have never been in love. And some people don't seem to feel a need to be in love or to experience the joys of companionship. I must say that the physical aspect doesn't interest me in the slightest, which is probably a bit of a problem. But for some women, it is a factor. I'm much more interested in the emotional bond, the intellectual bond, someone to laugh with, someone to chat with, last thing at night after a difficult day, someone who cares whether you arrived in London safely when you travel, someone who is batting for you and who will fight anybody who goes after you or treats you badly, someone you can fight for, someone you can care about other than your children or your relatives or your best friend. So, late love, is it worth looking for? Do you really think you can find it? And what sort of man are you looking for? Are you like some of my friends saying stuff like, you know what, if he's not rich, I can't be bothered, because they're quite well off themselves. Well, either they're quite well off themselves and they don't want some man who doesn't have as much money as they do because they're so suspicious, they suspect his motives, or they don't have much, but they're quite content with their lives and let's be honest, they're very materialistic in the sense that they think the only thing a man can add to their life is an additional layer of financial security. For example, I have a couple of girlfriends who, like me, they don't own their own homes, they're renting. And some of them say wistfully, well, it'd be nice to marry a man who actually owns a home. And then that way I know I've got a secure roof over my head for the rest of my life. Because the thing with rent, of course, is that you have to keep on working to pay it. And, will we still be healthy enough to pay rent when we're 70 or 75 or 80 for that matter? Probably not. What happens to people like us, especially those in countries that don't have a welfare state, where the government doesn't step in and give you free accommodation or subsidized accommodation if you can't afford it for yourself? Another factor is, what do you do with children who don't like you? Or they may not really have anything personal against you, but they may dislike the idea of their father being hijacked by some new woman who isn't their mother, whom they may suspect of gold digging. And even if there's no reason for them to suspect you of gold digging, they may just not like the idea of their father having somebody new. And I know somebody who was like a nurse to an uncle he really needed special care. And this woman was really quite dedicated. And the children were still ungrateful. And I said to them, look, this lady is doing what a qualified nurse would do for your dad. Let her be. Let him be happy. Let him have this care. But they just didn't like her. So it made her life so hellish. Can you believe that the old man wound up on his own with his daughters having to take turns to go in and look after him? And I keep on saying to them, you should just have left your stepmother alone. So, this whole thing about stepchildren is another major issue. And it's not one I would want to confront. Honestly, I'm so averse to embarrassment and disgrace. If I was dating a man whose children didn't like me, that would be it. I wouldn't even stick around to try to win them over. Even if he told me to ignore them, I would just like, whoa, okay, he's your dad, I'm off. Sorry you don't like me, bye-bye. So I think my son would be an excellent stepchild, unless the man was overtly toxic. My son would very much like me to get married again. He is worried about me. He doesn't like the idea that I'm on my own and that I don't have much money. And he just wants me to be okay. And I think any man who comes along, my son will sort of like say, oh, thank you, thank you, please stay. So, but loads of kids are not like that, especially the grown-up ones who are so used to having daddy to themselves, or they're wedded to their mother who hates their father, and it's a long internal toxic family conflict, which who needs it? So tell me, late love, stepchildren, are you still enjoying the love you had, the early love you had as a young person? Or have you been disappointed? Are you looking for love again? What's going on? Hey, and this is not just for women, it's also for guys. So, because some of my male friends complain that this channel is becoming like a sort of like women only thing. They just feel there's a sort of like totally feminist vibe about it. So, guys, I'm inviting you to also talk about your feelings, because I know that some men are good and they also have something to say about late love. And a lot of you have been used and abused by greedy women who are just after your money. So tell me. Let's communicate. Thank you.